And good morning, everybody. Welcome to this edition of the Insider's View. Our guest is Ian Rogers, who's CEO of Topspin. He has helped artists make the most of the web since 1993. Till 2008, he was VP and General Manager of Yahoo Music and Yahoo Video. Prior to that, he was President and CTO of Mediacode, which was later sold to Yahoo, President of New Media at Grand Royal, Webmaster at Nullsoft, sold to AOL, and CTO at rVision. He dropped out of a computer science PhD program in 1995 to go on tour with the Beastie Boys, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But he also holds a BA in computer science from Indiana University. Please welcome Ian Rogers to the Insider's View.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I think it's pretty interesting that a computer science guy in about 1992, 93, all of a sudden wound up in the music business. How did that happen?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not quite sure myself. It was definitely an accident. I studied computer science at Indiana University, and Indiana has a great music program. And during the time I was there, I actually did the thing. I was a broke kid, and I actually had a kid. I had a kid when I was 17, so I needed to make money. Right. So I went over to the school of the honors division and signed up for a work-study program, and just a little form. What are you studying? Computer science. What are you interested in? Music. I've just been a huge music fan my whole life, and played in a bad punk rock band in high school, and so when I signed up for this work-study assignment, they put me at the School of Music. At which point I realized that the music students were better at computers than any of the computer science students, but I was happy to be there. And I got involved in a research program in the early 90s to take all of the reserve listening materials from literally someone putting a needle on a record behind the desk, and 20 people sitting at a long table with headphones, and turn that into this experience where you could actually search the card catalog and bring the sheet music up on your screen and see the waveform of the audio on your screen and hit play, and the files would come from a server somewhere, which to us now is fairly passé, but this is pre-web and just pre-media on the internet, period. So in this research project, we built a system where you searched for music and streamed it to your computer, and in some way, shape, or form, kind of been doing the same thing ever since, just doing it in new and different ways. I mean, you could look at what we built at Indiana University in 1993 and compare it to Spotify today. Relatively the same idea. I'm going to search for music and play it. It's all a question of just kind of how and in what context. So that was how I ended up tripping into it.
Was it through that experience that you hooked up with the Beastie Boys?
Not really. They were related. So what happened was I'd built this software for the Next computer. It was NEXT, which was Steve Jobs' company, actually, if people aren't familiar with it. Obviously you're familiar with what he did before and after, which was called Apple. But he actually, this is a bit of a sidebar, but he sold Next back to Apple, and if you use an Apple computer today, which I'm sure you do, being in a school of music and music business, the underpinnings of OS X were the Next software, but at the time, Next was a platform that no one used. So we built this software for the Next, and we would always demo it for people, and they would say, "So you're going to build this for a Mac or a PC, right?" And I would say, "I'm not." And I really just didn't want to do it. It was just not an exciting endeavor at the time. But there was this brand new thing that didn't exist for Mac and PC yet, but it looked like it was going to, and it seemed like you could maybe write the program in one place and have it work on a multitude of platforms, and it was called the World Wide Web. So it was very, very, very new at the time, but it seemed like it was going to be something. So I ported what we had built at the music library to the World Wide Web, and that was my introduction to the World Wide Web. And then what I ended up doing was taking some of the things I was just doing for fun, like maintaining the Beastie Boys frequently asked questions list on this message board called Usenet, and translating that to the World Wide Web, because it seemed like it would be a great place for this content to just kind of live evergreen. But I was also I'm a firm believer in, anything worth doing is worth overdoing. I've generally applied that to my work. In other words, I'm obsessive. But with the Beastie Boys, it was just a little fan site, but I decided I had to have everything that anyone could possibly know about this band there. So we had, we had news articles, and it was, you're talking 1993, but we were still posting videos.
Oh yeah.
And what finally got the attention of their management company was they played on Letterman, and I had the video on the nascent World Wide Web before it had aired on the West Coast. And then I got this phone call, and I thought, oh great, this is where I get sued or shut down.
Yeah. Right.
And no, they were, they said, this is great. Will you do this for all of our bands? And I went, okay. So I started charging them $8.50 to do, Beastie Boys, Pixies, Sonic Youth, Red Cross, some comic book company, anything they could throw at me. It turned it into a little business, kind of accidentally.
Yeah, but the guys actually took you out. I mean, you actually went out on the road with them to create all these.
We started we started. It's a longish story, but we became friendly, and I think that it was really because the band at the time. If you think about it, this is a band who came up out of punk rock. And one of my fundamental theories of where media is going, we're moving from a mass market to a massive niches.
Right.
Punk rock was in the 80s was really it was a good sized niche. It was supported by this kind of underground network of zines, and you didn't find out about your new favorite record from FM radio or television. You found out about it from a friend or a zine or a magazine like Maximum Rock and Roll.
Right.
And the Beastie Boys came up out of that era, and I think that they really saw the internet as what it is today. I think they had really truly had a vision for it, and they said, wow, this is amazing, because this is going to allow people to organize in a way they haven't organized before. And they had a couple of specific things that I think were of interest. They had a little record label called Grand Royal that was there just putting out their friends' music. And they had a not-for-profit organization called Milarepa, which eventually went on to put on the Tibetan Freedom Concerts around the world, but at the time was just sort of their pet project, not-for-profit. And they knew that these were things that they wanted to get out to more and more people, but they also knew their ability to do that through their record label, through FM radio and MTV, even though they had a presence there, was limited. And I think they saw the internet as, wow, here's an efficient, both cost and time way to reach our fans. Mm-hmm. So I think that allowed me to get a little closer to the band than I might have if I had some other mechanism. And we also just sort of aesthetically were into the same music and skateboarding and all of this stuff as well. But what happened was, after we had become friends, they called and said, we're going on tour in the spring of '95, and we have this not-for-profit group that, it's pretty hard to get people to come to the not-for-profit table and fill out a card. And they said, we want to do something exciting to draw people to the table. Do you have any ideas maybe on the technological level? Well, we had been developing a CD-ROM, very state-of-the-art at the time, full-screen video on your computer. And we said, all right, well, so I called the band back a couple days later and said, all right, well, here's what you should do. Take old video game machines, gut them, put your CD-ROM inside of them, so you've effectively got a Beastie Boys video game, make it loud, and that would be a great idea. And they said, okay, well, let us call you back. So I hang up the phone. A couple days later, I get a call, not from them, but from their management company that says, okay, the band loves the idea. Pre-production starts in April. We need to get a budget. We're going to need you here. And I went, oh, no, wait, you don't understand. Like, I'm in college. I have a kid. I don't even know how to do that. Right? They asked me for an idea. I gave them an idea. You guys should totally do that. But I'm probably not a part of that. I still remember the guy from the management company. He goes, you want to do this, kid? We'll figure it out. So we did. So I said, I guess I'm done with grad school and ended up going out on the road with this big, noisy, we took video game machines. We did exactly what we said we were going to do. And that was how I ended up on the road and then eventually in Los Angeles.
Yeah. Fast forward a little bit. Is this kind of how the genesis of the idea for Topspin came into being?
I think it's sort of that became the loop at the end.
Okay.
Because I did start off working, directly with artists and with a number of artists. And then when I landed in LA, I ended up hooking up with another one of my clients. I had a little consultancy, is what I ended up kind of accidentally building, where we built websites for people. And one of my clients was this guy named Jim Evans, who's an incredible artist and a poster artist. You've probably seen some of his posters, even if you don't know it. These Taz posters that if you walk into pretty much any management company in LA, you'll find one of them on the wall somewhere. What we did, it was really a service business, and we worked a lot with the movie industry because there was more money there. But some with the music business as well. So we worked, directly with people, helping them build out their web presence. But very early days, it was really early adopters at that point, right? Then I got into the consumer side of the business with Nullsoft, where we made Winamp and Shoutcast, and really for the first time kind of bumped heads with the music business. We eventually made Nutella, which was the first kind of true P2P software. And then at Yahoo, really running a large consumer music, with more than $100 million in revenue of consumer-facing, radio product, subscription service, website, lyrics, all of that piece. But what really struck me, throughout those years of doing the consumer side is that because of the legal constraints, and just not even really legal constraints, rights constraints, and people not wanting to do new things with the rights to their music, it just struck me you weren't going to build an interesting business in music. It's very hard to build an interesting consumer business without first going back and really fixing the part of the value chain that touches the artist. Because the way that music goes from an artist having an idea to the public is an antiquated value chain that doesn't even allow interesting things to happen with the rights. So, long way of saying, I started out working directly with the artists. In the middle, really got away from that and was just trying to build awesome, things that music lovers wanted. Right. Kind of swapped ends of the value chain, but then realized, man, we need to get back to helping artists directly, because only by doing that are we going to be able to, to just build compelling applications again. Because there's not enough elbow room on the consumer side to build compelling consumer applications.
Right, because there are a lot of different moving parts to Topspin, right?
There are, yeah, and it's it's because there are a lot of different moving parts to to an artist's business.
Right, exactly.
If you look closely at an artist's business, there's a lot of places they make money and a lot of opportunities. Even just in the commerce channel, there's commerce at a whole bunch of retailers, and then artist as the retailer. Yeah. But there's also, how does their content make it into radio, and how do you monetize that and get paid for that via Sound Exchange, and how do I get my music to TV and film, and then there's the much larger problem up front of how do I get someone to care to begin with. How do I get someone to know that I exist and just be aware that I'm even here? It's definitely a complex problem.
Who are some of the artists you work with?
So we work with tens of thousands of artists today. Some of them you've heard of, and a lot of them you haven't. So the ones that you've heard of would be from Beastie Boys to Eminem, Linkin Park, Paul McCartney, George Harrison. We work with some of with labels on projects. We work quite a bit with Universal Music Group and Atlantic, and just a number of artists. Some of the most interesting case studies have been those folks in the middle who you've heard of today, but you might not have heard of 5 years ago, whether it's a Civil Wars or Yesayer or Metric, bands like that have really interesting stories who have come up without the help of the kind of pre-existing system and have turned into bands that I'm sure a lot of people in the audience have heard of. And then there's other folks, like the Pixies, who are just a really interesting case study of a band because they basically took the web years off. They went away in '94 and then came back in 2006 and said, "Has anything changed?"
It's a whole new world.
Yeah, everything's changed.
Yeah.
So then they've taken a completely different approach at kind of rebuilding, and they've done incredible business on Topspin, even though they haven't released a record since the early '90s.
Yeah. That's an interesting point, and that's where I was going with this, because there are a lot of established artists that you're working with, but for the emerging artist, how does Topspin help that emerging artist?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, Topspin is just software, right? So Topspin is just a tool, just like Pro Tools is just a tool. So, you can make a crappy record on Pro Tools, you can run a crappy marketing campaign with Topspin.
Right.
But what it's really about is giving you the tool set so that you can connect directly with your fans. I think that one of the key innovations of the internet really is this ability to connect directly. If you think about it, that is the key innovation. Think back 6 years ago, there was no Twitter, there was no Facebook like, there was no Lady Gaga for all intents and purposes, right? But today, Lady Gaga is #1 on Twitter with 14 million followers. And between Twitter and Facebook, she's got more than 50 million people connected directly to her. I think it's incredible to go, there's a site called fanpagelist.com. And that's a really eye-opening site for me, because you go there and you see how many brands, artists, actors and actresses, you're just looking at all these direct connections that didn't exist. You're seeing not only is Lady Gaga connected to 50 million people between Facebook and Twitter, but Ashton Kutcher is connected to all these people, and Coca-Cola brand is connected to all these people.
Right.
And those are direct consumer connections that just didn't exist. There was no mechanism for them to exist 15 years ago. So I think that what we are trying to do fundamentally is help people build that conduit. And I think that what you're trying to do is you're trying to connect. If you're successful connecting, then you need to cultivate that connection, which is a part that a lot of people forget, right? You don't get married on your first date, and you don't sell someone a T-shirt the moment they connect to you on Twitter. Right. You have to build up a relationship and trust, and really give your fans something of value, whether it's music or just personality, kind of being who you are. And then those it is valuable though for you to do that, because it does ultimately lead to commerce, and that commerce might be, it might be buying a digital download, but it also might just be going to a concert and picking up a T-shirt, helping to spread the word. So we always talk about this funnel, where you start with people who are unaware, and the majority of people are unaware of you. Even if you're a big band, still the majority of people are still unaware of your new project, right? So you're trying to take the unaware and make them aware, and that's one level down. Then you're trying to take that awareness and turn those people who are aware into fans, right? And hopefully those people are directly connected to you in some way. And this is the part that ties back to what I did with the Beastie Boys, by the way. I mean, if you would have asked me in 1995, so wait, what is it you do for the Beastie Boys? And I would say, my job is to take people who are kind of fans and make them super fans, right? Because that really, I could see that facilitation happening, right? You had somebody who liked that one song, but kind of given access to the band's entire persona, they fell in love with them, right? Because they were lovable guys. So you're trying to take that awareness and turn it into fans. It might be somebody who saw your video on YouTube and now they're connected to you. You're trying to take those fans and turn them into customers. Somebody on your mailing list then buys a concert ticket and comes to see you play. And then you want to take those people, once they're at that level, those are the evangelists, right? Those are the people who drag their friends to the show, who say, you've got to check out, have you heard this song? Post the song to Facebook, sign up to a service like Soundtracking and share your music, all of that kind of stuff. So And that's the loop, you know, because that puts more people on the top of the funnel, and you got to bring those people through. But also, I think that you have to respect that funnel. And I see all the time that, you know, it's that people try to skip steps, and you don't. It's just not consumer behavior that somebody watches a video on YouTube and then buys your T-shirt. You know, they're much more likely to. You just think about your own habits. You're much more likely. I watched that video. Oh, I like that. That's funny. Oh, there's a free download. All right, I'll get the free download. And now that sits on your iPod for a while, and then you know, the band comes to town, and you find out about that through Songkick or an email from the band or whatever it is. You go to the show. That's when you buy the T-shirt. Now you're ready for the pre-sale when it comes around next time. So it really, I think people forget that it takes a long time. It just takes a long time to cultivate those relationships and really, you know, make people fans.
Right. And understanding what the band or the artist is trying to do is get emails, addresses, I guess, for folks. Is that where we're going with this?
Yeah, I think direct connections.
Yeah,
so today, the way that you do that is emails are still the most effective way. Right. But Facebook, Twitter, mobile numbers, those are all valid. And there are a bunch of, I guess, tertiary ways too. You know, you think about a YouTube subscribe, or a follow on Instagram, follow on Tumblr. You know, there are a lot of ways that, you know, I think that entrepreneurs are constantly creating new ways that people can make these direct connections. And, you know, some of those channels are more efficient than others. Email is still the most efficient channel.
Yeah.
You know, the fact of the matter is that, you know, if I send something out on Twitter, you know, you may or may not see it. But you know, with email, you're highly likely to see it come into your box, even though people, you know, you say what you want about people getting unwanted emails, et cetera. But it is, you know, bang for your buck, really effective. Mobile is also effective, and in some age groups, it's even more effective than email. But it also costs more to send, so it's kind of that, you know, that you've got to make that trade-off between, you know, the cost of sending a text message, which is expensive relative to an email.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Technology versus the music industry. Music industry has been a little slow to embrace.
A little.
A lot. Let's talk about that disconnect, because it transitioned so fast, and then the catch-up. Talk a little bit about that, the technology versus the music industry.
And it's not done, right? I mean, I think the punchline in all this is that it's about to go through another gigantic transition to streaming.
Is that right?
And you know, to think that the industry is just getting used to the transition that they've just fought through, and now we're going to fight through another one. You know, I started really interfacing with the music industry when I was at a company called Nullsoft, and we made a product called Winamp. And Winamp was the most popular MP3 player. It's still a popular MP3 player, which is amazing to me. We sold the company to AOL in 1999. But that was the first time when it was clear that this MP3 format was something that consumers wanted. You know, it was just obvious. You know, here we were. We dealt with them every day. People wanted to get music in this format. They were buying CDs, putting them on their hard drive, and you know, this is the way they wanted to deal with their music. It was really nascent. There was no iPod. There weren't even the early MP3 players yet. But yeah, so we went out to labels and said, hey, people really want their music in this format. Maybe we can license the music from you and sell it in this format. And their first reaction was, well, what's an MP3? They just weren't up on it. It was not a small phenomenon, but they had no concept of it at all. So they were behind on just sort of being in the know. And then secondarily, their knee-jerk response was, hell no, right? You know, the CD is an amazing product. We can sell a piece of plastic at $17 for Best Buy, and that's what we're going to do because we control distribution, and there's absolutely no way that we are going to, you know, move this stuff online. So to say they were resistant to it is a gigantic understatement. They were actually against it. They actually fought hard to make it not happen, and behind closed doors would tell you, we are going to control this, and we are not going to let this happen. You know, I think that people at record labels honestly believed that the internet was a fad, and that we might be able to push people into more controlled environments like AOL in 1999. Right? That was the view. So they invested a little bit in a few things like liquid audio, which was one of the early technologies. There were some early rights management technologies. Microsoft invested heavily in rights management. The labels started some joint ventures. One was called Press Play, another one was called MusicNet, where they were said, okay, well, this is going to be our sandbox and how we're going to let things happen. But it was, it took 8 or 9 years of, a lot of us beating our head against the wall in various ways, with a significant amount of brain damage,
right.
To get to where, we could actually even sell MP3s. And over that time, piracy just became, more and more and more rampant, because, the industry, what we had always said is you have to have a carrot and a stick. Just the stick won't work. If you're not providing some people a legal alternative to get the music, they're going to keep stealing it. You can put piracy in the margins. We've seen, the video game industry do it, but the way you do it is by giving people what they want at a reasonable price on the front end, and then you can crack down on piracy over here. You can't just crack down on piracy because people will find a way around.
Is that why iTunes became so big?
I think iTunes, yes, because iTunes was really driven by the device.
Right.
Right. I think that iTunes is an incredibly interesting study. For so many reasons. Steve Jobs and what he's done with Apple overall is an incredibly interesting study. But iTunes in particular is fascinating because it was a huge lesson for me. There's a Harvard Business School professor named Clayton Christensen who wrote a book called The Innovator's Dilemma, and in that he describes innovation and how innovation happens and how it doesn't happen. And one of his key premises is that the integrated solution always wins. And if you think about, in the book, he's talking about mini steel mills and healthcare and nothing that has anything to do with the music business. But iTunes is the most excellent case of that, because if you look at what happened, you had, so as music was starting to come online legally, you had 2 basic camps. You had iTunes and its entire integrated ecosystem. They owned the operating system, they owned iTunes, the media player, they owned iTunes Store, the store, they owned the device at the very end. So it really is a beautifully integrated system. On the other hand, you had a number of people, myself at Yahoo included, but also, I don't know if anybody remembers that Virgin had a store, Rhapsody, there was, I'm not even sure I'll be able to go through them now. There were a number of iTunes competitors at the time. But we were, by definition, disintegrated. We were using Windows DRM at the bottom and Microsoft product. We were using middleware. A company called MusicNet provided the catalog effectively. We would build software on top of that. And then on top of that, you'd get some device from a third party. Maybe it's Samsung, maybe Toshiba, iRiver. There were, once upon a time, all of these third-party software companies building this disintegrated stack. Well, if you read The Innovator's Dilemma, you find out that the winner of that race is predetermined. Apple will win that race every time because that's the way it works. When the technology is not yet good enough, the integrated solution always wins. So I think that Apple came along with exactly the right product at just the right time. But there's something else interesting there that I think gets overlooked. And Steve Jobs was the first person to be able to get all of the labels in. Everybody to sit at the table and say yes. Liquid Audio would get a couple of catalog titles over here. Press Play got 2 of the labels. MusicNet had other 2 labels. And nobody could build a service with partial rights. Steve Jobs came in and he said, here's what we're going to do. We're all going to do it. It's going to be 99 cents. It's going to be simple. We're going to crush it. And it worked for 2 reasons, in my opinion. One is the cult of personality of Steve Jobs. He's the kind of guy that people want to say yes to. 2, and this is the thing that people forget, at the time, the record labels looked at it and said, it's a nice little experiment because it's only Apple, and Apple's only 5% of the market. So what's the harm, right? It's just Apple, right? Let's just go ahead and give it a try on the Apple platform, and we'll see if this works. It seemed like a really harmless experiment. At the time, it was impossible to think that Steve Jobs might release software for the PC. It just seemed absurd. So it really seemed like it was just going to be a small little experiment. I think that made it more digestible for folks.
Incredible what happened there, isn't it?
It's amazing.
What is the future there, if you don't mind me asking? What do you think the future is for the iTunes now that Jobs is gone?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I have no idea how Steve Jobs being gone will impact that. You know, I've had people at Apple tell me it's the only place they've ever worked where everybody works for one person, right? So what happens when that person leaves is obviously a soul-searching question for the company. But I think that, you know, where they're headed with the iCloud, you know, it's definitely one flavor of what we will see going forward. You know, if you look going forward at music overall, it's definitely a streaming future.
Yeah.
You know, we're not going to take our phone and connect it to our PC with a little cable 5 years from now. We know that's not going to happen. So some way my phone the music is going to come to my phone. So I think there's really two models at the moment. One is I'm going to rent all of my music model, which is, you know, Spotify, RDO, Mog, Rhapsody. And the other is I'm going to buy my music, but store it somewhere in the cloud. I'm going to kind of side load it into a locker that I get. And that's really where, you know, Apple's at with their iCloud, what Amazon's doing with their cloud service, and Google, who's rumored to be launching in the next 2 weeks an update to their locker service as well. I think that's the best way to parse it apart, in my view, is that the future is streaming, and there's two models: buy and locker, or rent. And we'll have to see which way it goes. But I think the really interesting thing is that it is kind of anybody's game now, because you know, Apple really had it locked up with the device. But now, I mean, I can use Spotify on my iPhone as easily as I can use iCloud on my iPhone. You know, there's very low switching costs, very low barrier of entry there. So I think if you know, if you think about it, the switching costs from iTunes are very high, right? This is the device that manages the application that manages my device. I'm not going to use another program. But, you know, if I've got my phone, I could kind of use I'm going to use whichever app is best. And I think that's really good for consumers. I think I think it's going to be a really interesting, you know, 5 to 15 years as it sorts out.
We're even seeing the beginnings of that right now. I mean, with the iPhones and with the iPods. I don't even hardly use my iPod. I've got everything on my iPhone right now. How is this going to impact Topspin?
Well, I think the interesting thing is that while we're clearly evolving to a streaming model, if you think about, you know, just the sort of average unit price, you know, a CD was somewhere north of $10, right? $12, $14. And unit price on iTunes is 99 cents. The unit price in this new world is pretty scary, and you hear people talking about it all the time. You know, you've got, you know, unit value on Spotify is somewhere under a penny. Unit value on Pandora is somewhere around 1/10 of a penny. And, you know, if I stream a song from my Google locker or my Amazon locker, which is unlicensed, you know, the artist makes exactly 0 cents, right? Hopefully I made some money when that was purchased, but, you know, if you email me a file and I locker it at Amazon, nobody makes any money when I play it, right? So, you know, you've got the industry evolving toward models which by definition have lower value to the artist. You know, but the average revenue per transaction on Topspin is north of $25. So across everything Topspin does, our average revenue per transaction is $26. Comparable on iTunes is less than $3. The sort of average Topspin, or the Topspin optimized campaign, which is like when people say, oh, that's a Topspin-like campaign, those are in the $50 range. And when you throw tickets into the mix, it's $88 is the average. So you're looking at, you know, approaching $90.
Right.
But I think that's the really interesting thing, is that, you know, I think that, you know, in a world where the game is collections of fractions of pennies, you know, people are naturally going to move into the direct-to-consumer channel because it's more lucrative. So instead, you're getting tens of dollars from hardcore fans, right? So I think if you think about that funnel, it makes sense. You know, you're hopefully, in the unaware to aware category, that's where you're going to pick up the fractions of pennies and build awareness. Something like Spotify is great because you can see I'm listening to something on Facebook and click it and go, oh wow, I've never heard that, and become familiar with it, where before, you had no ability to come, if you think about what we had to do to hear music 15 years ago, you had to either borrow it or wait for it to come on the radio or buy it. Now I can just click it and sample it, and I might fall in love with something and end up moving down that funnel. But I think it becomes increasingly important for artists to have more revenue opportunities down that funnel, right? So the ability to make more from those hardcore fans is really important. I mean, I always think that when I worked with the Beastie Boys, 15, 16, 17 years ago, we didn't care how big a fan you were. We were trying to sell you the same product, right? You're a huge fan, lifelong fan, you do anything with this band, buy the CD. You just like that one song you heard on the radio, buy the CD, right? It was the same, we had the one-size-fits-all product. And today, if you go to BeastieBoys.com, you can buy a $750 set of, they're effectively action figures, and the money goes to charity. But there's the very, 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 very small number of fans are actually going to pony up for that. But it's an important, it's definitely not a one-size-fits-all product.
Right,
anymore.
but you can reach those fans through that,
Absolutely.
as opposed to going to what used to be record stores.
It's a product that would not have you would not have sold a $750 anything at Virgin Records. I mean, you'd have lost your shirt just on the returns.
That's right.
Let's
talk about how technology and digital and the internet has evened the playing field for indies versus the major levels. That is the case, I assume.
It definitely is. I mean, it's definitely provided opportunities for indies. And I think that as we are moving from a mass market to massive niches, that is really, really going to continue. And in fact, I don't think we've even seen the beginning of it yet, of that leveling. I mean, I think if you think about it, we've been, we as consumers have been beholden to mass media that's the way it was 20 years ago. Whereas now, none of us are actually sort of average, right? We all have our deep loves, and now we have access. We have more access to those than ever. So I think that what is in the process of happening is, you just have empowered consumers with unlimited choice. But I think we're really just at the beginning of people being able to actually find what it is they're looking for. And as that improves, you'll see more and more of people really diving deep into things that they love as opposed to things that they just kind of like, right? I mean, I think that you could really sum up a lot of radio and television as, things that you're not going to love but not going to hate. And I think that more and more what people are able to do is they're able to, to spend their time with things they genuinely love. The example that I use, all the time is I watched Gilligan's Island and the Brady Bunch every day after school. Wasn't great, but it was what was on, and it was better than any of the other choices. Yeah. Whereas, now, kids of the same age, they probably wouldn't do that. They're more likely to go on YouTube and watch a video that their friends made because it's more relevant to them and has more meaning to them, and it's available to them right now. Or they might watch, a program on demand that, that is exactly what they want to see. So I think that's where the leveling of the playing field happens, is, because if you make something great, people can get access to it. And the way that people are going to hear about things is from their social network, but also from trusted sources. Yeah. So I'll use this to mention this interesting web distribution evolution that a guy named Andy Weissman, who's a VC at Union Square Ventures, came up with. His description of the evolution of the web goes something like this. First, there was direct connection. So you typed a URL into your browser, right? That was the way the internet first worked. Then the internet started to get a little organized. Yahoo and others were portals that organized the internet. If you guys are probably too young to remember when Yahoo was just a bunch of links. that were categories, automotive, and then you'd go Ford, and but after that, Google really brought search to the forefront, and it was incredible when you could type in what you wanted into Google, and you would actually get a result that wasn't, the result you wanted wasn't 5 pages deep. It was at the top. It was incredible. But now we're in this sort of fourth era of social distribution, right? Where, so if you put it even more simply, the amazing phases of the internet are, first it was all available, and that was incredible. And then you could find it, and that was even more incredible. And now you don't even have to find it. It comes to you. You can log into Facebook, and boom, there's a whole list of relevant content, or go to the front page of Twitter, and your friends are effectively curating the internet for you. And I really think that the next phase is about trusted sources, where we all have brands. Pitchfork is a great example of a brand that has done a great job with independent rock of being the trusted brand online for that genre of music, and I think we'll see more of that. And I think the really interesting thing that's happened is, because of what we discussed earlier with the music business, just trying to put the toothpaste back in the tube for 15 years. In 2011, it's no small. It's just you really couldn't overstate what's happened just this year, because music has gone through all 4 of those phases in one single year, right? I mean, what is MOG if it's not a portal for music? What is the Spotify Facebook integration if it's not music finally hitting this social distribution phase? And none of that was possible last year, and it's all possible this year. So I think that we should really expect to see an acceleration in what you asked, which is that leveling the playing field, where we all have more access to music than ever, and it can be distributed to us via social mechanisms and also sort of trusted sources. And
also, on the other side of that, for the emerging artists, they need to be entrepreneurs, don't they?
I mean, every artist is an entrepreneur running a small business. Every band is a small business. I think the double-edged sword of the internet, the double-edged sword in what I just described is, it's incredible for consumers because, again, you have unlimited choice, and that means that you have the power to choose, to choose whatever you want. For the artists, it's incredible because we really have seen it happen that artists have come out of nowhere and connected with their fan base. I mean, look at a group like Odd Future. Odd Future won Best New Artist on the VMAs this year, which is a very mainstream stage, but they did it by through extremely organic underground process. So that can happen. But I think the thing that people need to keep in mind is that the supply and demand in music is never not going to be out of balance, right? I think you've got tens of thousands of artists earning a living from music today, and you have tens of millions of people buying instruments at Guitar Center. So even if companies like Topspin and others are extraordinarily successful, and we move that to hundreds of thousands, that would be incredible if we could help hundreds of thousands of people earn a living making music. There's still going to be a gigantic gap between those hundreds of thousands and the millions or tens of millions who aspire to be in that group. So I think the great news is that it can happen. The difficulty is you have more artists than ever trying to make it happen. So we had this conversation over dinner last night. You have to be exceptional in order to cut through. There's no reason for any of us to care about anything that's mediocre in the coming years.
That's true about anything. But getting funding also for the music industry is not always easy, is it?
No, it's true. I mean, getting funding for the artists, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's a real question as to where's the funding going to come from? Because of the traditional model, there's less funding in the traditional model today, but there are new, there are people who are establishing new ways of funding artists, and I think that's another thing that's going to evolve in the coming years in a pretty major way.
Is it, from your perspective, what advice do you have for the artist out there that is struggling and to know where to turn with all the tools and options that have emerged in the past few years?
Well, I think step one, which oftentimes when we're talking about technology, it's overlooked, is you do have to be exceptional and you have to be amazing. Right. So I think people need to be realistic about, how many people are going to like what it is they do. And I think the opportunity that's there though is that, if you are great, you can find an audience. My first recommendation, being honest, is always just for people to have patience. Because one thing we've learned, over the years is that it just takes a long time. There are things that you think will happen overnight, and they don't, and they never do. I have people. We work with this band called Metric, who's had a great success, and people act like it happened overnight, and it's just because they didn't know about the first 5 years. The first 5 years were long and hard, and they lived in crappy apartments and
Right.
with rats in them, right? I mean, they did the real grind. But I think beyond that, you just need to use the tools wisely, as much as possible. Build direct connections with fans, because those are the ones that are going to pay off over the long term. Even if you're struggling to get that going now, I mean, some of the artists that we work with who have been successful in direct-to-consumer space will tell you that it's been kind of a break-even endeavor for them, this direct-to-consumer thing. One artist in particular who's done pretty well, made $150,000, small artist, but has done fairly well in the direct-to-consumer space. I asked them, what they've had to spend to get there, and they said basically about the same as they've made. And I sort of said, oh, I'm really sorry. And they said, are you kidding me? This is great, because I've been able to break even, building a fan base of hundreds of thousands of people that are now going to be an important part of the rest of my career. So I think, building that base of fans is really what it's all about. I mean, what you're really trying to do is just have more fans tomorrow than you had yesterday, and what's the path to get there? Unfortunately, it's still really early, so it's not clear exactly which of the tools you're going to want to be using, but it's still kind of by hook or by crook in any way you can, and depends a lot on the genre, but. Using tools like YouTube wisely, et cetera. One thing I would definitely stress, there's two bits of advice that I always give. One is spend your money on the music. Spend your money on the content. It might be music, it might be a video, but if I had, I love our PR company, but if I had $5,000 and I had to choose, am I going to spend that money making a music video, or am I going to spend it on PR? I'd spend it on the music video. Right, because that's something that's going to be on YouTube forever and ever and ever, and if it's awesome, that's the thing that's going to get you the fans. People are going to love what you do, not what your PR company said, right? So always spend your money on the content. The other advice that I always give is you've got to be fairly systematic about having yourself out there. I talk to artists all the time. They're kind of waiting for something to happen. They're waiting to finish the album. They're quiet because they don't want to spoil anything.
Right.
And that's every day is a missed opportunity. You need to do something small on a weekly basis and something big on a monthly basis. So if you're an artist, get a year calendar, 12 boxes, fill in the blanks on what's the big thing you're going to do in each of those months. Yeah. And if you can't come up with 12 things to do in a year, you're probably in the wrong line of work. Right, but those things can be simple. It might be I'm going to release an album, I'm going to announce a tour, I'm going to make a video, I'm going to do a collaboration with that person over there. But you really need to have something that is worth emailing your fans about once a month.
Great. Ian, thanks so very much. We're glad you got an office in Nashville now, too, by the way.
Wayne Leroy.
Ian Rogers, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much for having me.
This has been a production of the Mike Curb College of Entertainment and Music Business at Belmont University and Nashville Public Television.